Kat Ford, and you're listening to the European Skeptics Podcast, the real ESP experience.
You told me that aliens really exist. You met them and swooned with elation. They took you to Pluto and
You're listening to the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 527. I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. See ya!
Congratulations, András, for kicking out Orban.
Thank you. I'm so happy.
Yeah, so...
but so is half the world.
Well, so for posterity, if you're listening to this in 10 years' time or something, this is the week where Orban got voted out of office. Fantastic. We thought it couldn't happen to a worse person. I mean, it's really great. And it looks like, well, you have to be cautious and say we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe this congratulations will age badly, but I don't think it couldn't get worse than Viktor Orban. So we will keep our fingers crossed, as we do as skeptics, for Peter Magyar, and hope that he can at least rectify some of the bad things that have happened over the last 16 years or so.
Yeah, he will have a difficult job, but he has an overwhelming majority. So he actually is about to win, because not all the votes have been counted yet. There are ongoing recounts as well. But if the predictions are correct, they will have a majority that not even Orban has had at any point of his career. So this is pretty good. This is a very strong mandate. They will have to, change the constitution. They will have to change a couple of very important laws in order to get the country back on the right track when it comes to democratic institutions and stuff. So it's very important. And this is why it looks like all over the world, there have been celebratory comments coming from world leaders. It's absolutely mind-blowing how important this is. I usually listen to things like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and others, and other comedy shows, and they've been engaging with this topic. That's how international it has become. And here in Hungary, on the night of the elections, when Orban conceded, he had to, because as the numbers were pouring in, the results at a very early stage were already very straightforward and very clear. So there was no denying that it would be a big loss for him. Some people are a little bit surprised that he conceded that early and that he did at all, because a lot of people were expecting that he would pull a Trump on this whole thing. I didn't hear it. It was Eran Segev that who also congratulated us on it, and he coined that phrase. At least this is where I heard it from. Pulling a Trump. So a lot of people were expecting that he would not accept the results and try to tack it and something very strongly disadvantageous for the whole political system here in Hungary. But apparently they had known. So there had been lots of polls prior to the elections that showed exactly that. And they tried to attack those pollsters, several of them. So the propaganda machine of the Orban regime tried to dismiss these results, but they must have known that there was something to them, because Orban was doing rallies all over the country that he hasn't done in 20 years. So it was obvious that even they saw it as a serious threat. So he didn't have much of a choice. So he had to concede, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of backlash. But the celebrations out on the streets, you know what it was like? You know, when the Wizard of Oz at the end, when the Wicked Witch dies?
Yeah.
And it was like, Ding dong, the witch is dead. The celebratory
Yes.
scenes. It was like that in Budapest and in many, many cities all across the country. People were out in the streets in massive, massive crowds. Like in Budapest, some people estimate the crowd to be close to 100,000 people out there on the streets. It's phenomenal.
Well, it's very refreshing to get some good news nowadays when it comes to politics and international, because I see this as an international news, actually, because Orban has been so influential in talking to Trump and to Putin as well, and trying to sabotage important things that are going on in the EU. So it is really news of international importance, I would say. And it's been a long while since we heard something good. So, good.
It's a good example. And plus, there are other things like lessons to learn for skeptics from this, because apparently the propaganda machine was not successful in this campaign, at least. So it has been successful for 16 years, but this result does show that it can be beaten. Propaganda, disinformation can be countered in a way. If I can find the time and the resource to write this up for skeptics out there and what the lessons are that we can learn from it, I will. And hopefully you will all be able to read this at some point.
Very good. I'm
very
happy.
Where, but I will let you know.
Yeah, very happy. Very happy for you
Me
and
too.
for
Me
Europe
too.
and for the rest of the world. I am going to tease something for next week. I'm going to talk about it next week, because today we have an interview, but let's get back to that. But 2 days ago, I tested cupping, Andras, and I did something very interesting from a skeptical point of view. I will say no more about this. It was an experience, and I will give a full report next week. So stay tuned for that.
Can't wait. Looking forward to finding out what surprises you've got there. And speaking of surprises, I'm pretty sure that the interview that is coming up will have a couple of surprising aspects of how the psychology of religious or spiritual beliefs work. We had an interview with Kat Ford. Some of you might be familiar with that name if you often are in the circles of Skeptics in the Pub online. But without further ado, I think we should crack on with that interview.
Let's do that.
Every now and then, we interview someone whose work is of particular interest to skeptics around Europe. Today, our guest is Dr. Kat Ford, who's a postdoctoral research fellow at Brunel University, London, currently working on the Spirits and Sources project, which explores alternative spiritual beliefs in Glastonbury, UK. She gained her PhD in psychology from the Centre for Culture and Evolution at Brunel University, where she looked at the relationship between religious cognition and optimism. And we have to mention that she's also a member of the highly acclaimed team of Skeptics in the Pub online. Woohoo! Kat, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show, Kat.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's amazing how we've known each other for years, right? At least we bumped into each other a lot of times at QED, Skeptics in the Pub, and Skepticamp. But at least on my side, I really regret that we haven't had the chance to properly talk about stuff that you do. So I'm really glad that we have this opportunity now. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I feel the same. QED is always such a whirlwind that I come away thinking I didn't take the opportunity to speak to that person or this person, or if I did, I was blackout drunk, and they'll probably never speak to me again.
Did you ever have a religious experience after a pub night at QED?
I've certainly considered praying the next morning. I think that's about as close.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So we know each other or of each other and have met several times, but maybe for people who do not know who you are, Kat, could you give us a short introduction? Who is Kat Ford and what do you do? What's your background and what's your professional interests?
Okay. I feel like Andres pretty much nailed it, but I've been in and around the skeptics community for about 15 years. Got involved in it through the Merseyside Skeptics Society. I just happened to see a news article about them doing some work trying to do experiments with people who claim to have psychic powers. And through dumb luck, the day I read that, I think was either the day of or the day before they were going to have a meeting in Liverpool. So I thought, these sound like my kind of people, I'll go along. That's kind of been it since then. I've been to varying degrees involved in skepticism pretty much since then. The other part of my life is doing psychology. So just before I started going to Merseyside Skeptics, I'd done a master's degree in evolutionary psychology. Then I ended up doing my PhD at Brunel, which is where I'd also done my master's. And now I'm a postdoctoral research fellow. I spent a bit of time down in Glastonbury, about 18 months, because the project it's an interdisciplinary project in a sense. And my work was kind of in the area of anthropology and ethnography and psychology. So spending time just in Glastonbury as a sort of a professional people watcher and vibe checker. So that's what I was doing down there.
Yeah, but Glastonbury specifically is famous for being very wooey, and there's a lot of legend. There's King Arthur. There is a lot of things going. What is that about? How did that happen, and why Glastonbury specifically?
That is such a big and difficult to answer question. I think there's a variety of different explanations. I think the first thing that I should probably say is most people assume that Glastonbury has become such a magnet for people with alternative spiritual beliefs and alternative worldviews because of Glastonbury Festival. Mm-hmm. From what I can gather, Glastonbury Festival is probably where it is because of the myth around Glastonbury. So there was always this, or for a very long time, there's been a mystique around Glastonbury. And that drew in people that were interested in counterculture. And because that area was a hotbed for counterculture, that's why we got the festival. That seems to be the order of events as far as I can tell. The festival itself is not actually in Glastonbury. It's a few miles up the road. Oh. So the one summer that there was 2 summers that I was living in Glastonbury while the festival was on. And both years, every now and again, you'd see some very confused looking people with their tents and their festival gear wandering up and down this tiny little high street, wondering where the festival was. It's like, it's way down the road, my friend.
Okay, well, that's good information for our listeners. So do your research and go to where David Bowie were or whoever. So tell us a little bit about the Spirits and Sources program and how that came to be, what it's all about, and how it came to focus on Glastonbury.
So we have a lot of research that looks into the psychology of religion, but there is a lot less that we know about people that fall into the category of spiritual but not religious. They're a really broad category. There's a lot of different beliefs that fall into that bracket, which is one of the reasons that they're a difficult population to study. Add into that, historically, the psychology of religion was born out of American universities. And so from the conception of it, it's been very much focused on Protestantism, kind of Christianity, and that kind of framework of what a religion looks like. So when we look at religion, we get very focused on labels, like which denomination do you consider yourself to be? What's your label? How do you describe yourself? And we get very interested in measuring attendance. That's fine when you're looking at an organized religion where the people who follow it have a place to go on a regular basis. And it's interesting information. It tells us a lot about changes in behavior across time. But those kind of questions, when you put them to somebody who is spiritual but not religious, the questions don't even make sense. And so it can be really difficult to get an accurate idea of how many people are spiritual but not religious. So I know on a recent episode, when Brian was on, he was talking about how across the globe there are increasing numbers of people that respond to these kind of questions about, like, what's your religious belief, with none, like no religious affiliation. That is a huge grey area.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that may or may not fall into spiritual but not religious could also identify as none, like no particular religion. Yeah. And so if you're interested in population level information about how often people go into church, great information. If you want to get inside people's heads and understand how they're making sense of the world, that response doesn't really tell us much. It just tells us that they don't identify with a specific religion. But what does that mean about how they're making sense of the world? Like, how do they see their place in the world? How do they build community? What is belonging when you don't have these labels? So that was partly why it's interesting to look at people that are spiritual but not religious. And then why Glastonbury? Because it is incredibly spiritually diverse. A recent, I think it's census data, found that in the town of Glastonbury, which has a population of about 8,500 people, there are over 70 different spiritual paths represented in that town. And one of the big questions that we have as part of this project is this question of, like, what is community? What is belonging? How do you find your social network if you don't have something like a church to go to, if you don't all have very similar doctrinal beliefs? What does belonging look like? How does that relate to your identity? So Glastonbury was the perfect place to try and start to look into that.
Yeah.
There is a very important thing that I think we all need to go through, and that's the definition of spiritual people. So how do you define that? I mean, there are so many different things that one can think of when it comes to spirituality.
Yeah. Defining spirituality and defining religion is tricky, to say the least. Generally, when we're doing research looking at people that are spiritual but not religious, that's a self-described category. So we don't assign that category to people. People use that phrase to describe themselves. What is it to be spiritual? Ask 100 different people, you'll get 100 different answers. It's a very personal thing. I think we have a better idea of what it is to be religious, at least in countries where the cultural majority religion is Christianity. Like, we know it means believing these specific things, having this specific holy book. But when you try and define religion for the purpose of research, it's very tricky because... So a lot of people that do work in the area of researching religion, especially from a psychology perspective, we kind of come to think of religion as what we call a folk category. Like, we all talk about religion, we all kind of know what it is, but it's one of those things where you know it when you see it. Psychological research looking at religion tends to break religion down into one of two categories. We talk about cognitive religiosity. That's kind of the worldviews, the beliefs, those kind of things that tend to go with religion. Or we talk about ritual.
I have a question here, because I think we as skeptics, it's very easy to label everybody who has answered none as not affiliated with any religion. We sort of hope, at least, that they are rational, skeptical people. Obviously, that's not true. But do people who tick that box self-identify as one group or many different groups? Or maybe they don't think about that? And as a follow-up, do you, in your research, find that there's some sort of way to categorize them in subcategories for nones, if you will?
Yeah. Non is like, yeah, it's incredibly broad. It just means not affiliated with a specific religion. So that can take in everything from our kind of worldview, people that are atheists generally, that like science, reason, critical thinking, all that jazz, all the way up to people that believe in nature spirits or who engage in divination, like trying to read the future through either like runes or tarot cards, people that believe in astrology. It can even include people that believe in Jesus, but see Jesus as an energy or see Jesus as a very important spiritual prophet, but don't like Catholicism or Christianity as an institution. So it covers a really broad range. And it's really difficult to get accurate data on that. What we do know, or what some research seems to indicate, is that people who are referred to as like pure naturalists, so people who don't believe in God, don't believe in spirits or the paranormal, that really like scientific explanations for things and endorse that view of reality, make up about 2% of the population.
Oh, wow.
2% only.
My mind was blown when I heard that.
Yeah.
And then I realised, yeah, I pretty much only hang around with skeptics. Of course, I think there's more of us than there are.
Yeah. My reaction was, okay, that's why I feel so lonely.
Yeah. Yeah, we are very much in the minority. I don't know whether when I hear about an increase in non-religiously affiliated, I think at one point I would have had the response of like, yay, hooray, we're winning. I hope they're all rational atheists. I don't feel that way anymore.
Mm-hmm. You should stop doing that research. It just brings down your mood.
Bad for you.
It shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So if we get back to the program, the Spirits and Sources program, what are the actual goals of that program? What do you want to achieve?
So we have a few different objectives. One is just to get a better understanding of what is it to be spiritual but not religious, or if you're not into that label of it, what does it mean to have alternative spiritual beliefs? So there's a team of about 8 of us, and we're all taking slightly different angles on it. And there's lots of different things that we're interested in. So one bit of research that's being done is looking at essentially people's individual life histories. So what is the story of people that become spiritual but not religious? How much religious exposure do they have in their childhood? What changes? Like if they were part of an organised religion, why did they leave that but still end up with something? Why not move to nothing? We're also interested in these concepts around belonging and community. That's an area that is really neglected. As I said a little bit earlier, when we look at organised religion, we cannot help ourselves when it comes to asking questions like, what's your label? What's your denomination? How often do you go? And in religious research, we often go, well, that's belonging. That's how we define belonging. That's how we measure it. That's what community is. It's like going to this place with these people.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that you have to go by people's own statements, what they tell you about how they feel. You can't take a blood sample and identify them that way, right? You have to go by what they are saying.
So that's also like part of the project. If you're asking people about what church they belong to and how often they go there, that's all well and good, but to what extent does that capture the internal sense of belonging? Is that the same thing? A lot of research that looks at people that kind of fall into the spiritual but not religious category doesn't really look at community around spiritual but not religious. It doesn't really talk about belonging. It very much focuses on individual personality differences. But especially when you go to somewhere like Glastonbury, just because people that are spiritual but not religious aren't affiliating with a specific religion and aren't going to a specific location, doesn't mean that they're not concerned about things like finding and building and maintaining community, or of finding that effective sense of belonging. But in this vacuum, a lot of researchers have previously written off these things as not being of concern to people that are spiritual but not religious. And there are a lot of very unflattering stereotypes of people that are spiritual but not religious, that they're like self-involved, narcissistic, not community focused. And that is blatantly not true.
Plus, it's not based on sufficient information. So you cannot really derive that from the information that you have at hand, right?
Yeah. Or because we've been trying to measure it with the wrong tools. Because, if you ask somebody who's spiritual but not religious, what community do you belong to? Do you belong to a spiritual community? How interested are you in going somewhere where everyone has the exact same beliefs as you? How often do you go out of your way to hang out with people who have the same beliefs as you? Those questions don't make sense. So they'll get really low scores on all of that. And then we'll look at those scores and go, wow, these people do not care about community. That's not the case. We've just been asking the wrong questions. Or we've been asking questions in completely the wrong way.
Yeah, I think we skeptics, we care about community as well. I mean, we love to go to QED. We love to meet up. So that has nothing to do with it, really.
Yeah, and sitting in a room full of skeptics, like several hundred skeptics, that's a bit of a spiritual experience as well. So we can be categorized as spiritual but non-religious, right? Sorry, I don't want to derail this conversation. I'm just.
No, I think you're right. Like, there are a lot of things that we do that could fall into the category of ritualistic. And QED, like, it had some of those characteristics. It definitely did. Yeah, and I think this is part of the problem of like trying to define what spiritual means. Because I am capable of all the same emotions that people would describe as being spiritual emotions. I just think that they are very much human experiences and not attributable to a world that's kind of beyond our comprehension. And I think that's kind of where I think the line might be, at least for me. I think that we live in a world where everything can be more or less explained by the laws of physics. If science doesn't have an explanation now, it probably will at some point. I don't think there are forces beyond human comprehension operating on us. But I think spiritual people do believe that. And it's the more you think about it, the more it's just such a small difference, but also a completely profound difference.
But what does science know about how does that develop? I mean, there are people who have had previous spiritual experiences and then kind of educated themselves out of that, if I can say so, or the other way around. So we know examples of both directions happening on occasion. For example, you personally, have you ever had something, because something has drawn you towards researching religion and the psychology behind it? Was that like a personal experience of a similar kind, or is it completely just out of curiosity?
I definitely got into this just out of curiosity. So my route in was evolutionary psychology. And there was certainly a time I would have described myself as an evolutionary psychologist. Okay. I wouldn't anymore for very nerdy, pedantic reasons. The short version is that sometimes people that refer to themselves as evolutionary psychologists, capital E, capital P, have a very specific way of doing evolutionary psychology. And it focuses a lot on adaptations. And adaptations in the world of evolution has a very specific meaning. Yeah. You're saying that this feature exists because it has repeatedly solved this problem of survival or reproduction. And sometimes when you take that approach, I think you're blinding yourself to a lot of more interesting and more nuanced explanations. And especially when it comes to humans, we have culture. Like, our cultural abilities and cultural way of transmitting information is incredibly powerful. And a lot of people that are sort of dyed in the wool, capital E, capital P, evolutionary psychologists don't take culture seriously enough. So I prefer the term evolutionary behavioral scientist because I think evolution is phenomenal and it has ways to contribute to our understanding of human behavior, but I don't think it's like the only explanation of any value.
The problem is also that if you study evolution, you can look at bones and stuff, but ideological ideas do not fossilize very well. It tends to be a lot of speculation fueled by your own biases and point of view. But it doesn't mean that it's not valuable to think in those terms.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So even though thoughts don't fossilize, there are ways of assessing how likely it is that a behavior is evolutionary. Like, for example, one of the things that you'd want to do is, does this behavior appear in pretty much all humans, regardless of what culture they're raised in, regardless of environment? Does this feature have a predictable pattern of development? Like, does it take this form by the age of 2, that form by the age of 4? Like, is it predictable in the way it develops in individuals? Does the behavior solve a problem? Does the behavior solve the problem so well that it looks like it was made for that? Like, it has the illusion of design because it works so well. And what is the likely history of that behavior? Would less complex forms of that behavior still solve a problem? And if you can get good evidence for all of that, you might, and I stress the word might, have an adaptation on your hands. Like, I personally think the bar for the point in which you say that's an adaptation, it needs to be high. It necessarily needs to be really high.
So if we leave the evolutionary perspective a little bit behind and say, for people today who are spiritual, what are the benefits for them, or they as they seem it? And also, are there any hazards of being spiritual? If we can agree on the definition.
Benefits, optimism for a lot of people, not for everyone. So in my doctoral thesis, I talk about religiosity, which is, again, this cognitive approach to the world. And the way I described it in my thesis is a belief in transcendent teleological thinking. So basically, a belief that there is a purpose, and it's a purpose that transcends the material world. So that can be encapsulated with phrases like, everything happens for a reason. Like that kind of approach. And generally speaking, it looks like engaging in that type of thought helps people maintain optimism. Especially when the chips are down.
Yeah, it can be comforting.
Yeah, but it's not just comforting. Having some degree of optimism is very helpful. So you need at least a little bit of optimism to go for that promotion, to ask that person out, to invest in your pension. Like, a lot of what we do requires a little bit of optimism. And so it's quite likely that humans have developed lots of different cultural habits, lots of things like that help us just boost our optimism a little bit to keep us going. So I think the element of comfort is absolutely there, but it's not just comfort. It has measurable positive outcomes for your daily life. One of the problems with that view is that not every religion is optimistic. There's nothing particularly optimistic about the threat of hellfire and damnation.
I agree.
Yeah.
But there are elements of these kind of beliefs that the universe has a plan. Everything works out in the end if you just make sure you behave in positive ways, that you engage in the right action, that you can get the universe on your side. Those things can really boost your optimism. So I think that's one element of it. I think one of the reasons that religion and spirituality is basically a human universal, like we see it in every known culture, we see something that we would recognize as religion. I think that is because we are very used to seeing the world in a way that has purpose. Like, we are surrounded by other beings that have purpose, that have a thing that they want to achieve. And we are surrounded by artifacts. So, like, chairs are for sitting on, toasters are for making toast, trousers are for wearing. We're very used to seeing things and having this purpose-focused explanation of these objects. Mm-hmm. And we know that children reliably develop this teleological way of explaining the world around them. By about the age of 7, they'll have fully developed this way of looking at the world where the sun is for helping the grass grow. Trees are for sheltering animals from rain. Like, there is something about that way of approaching the world that I think might be an adaptation.
Yeah, so we're very good at seeing agency in inanimate objects. Maybe religion is just a side effect of that. I don't know.
Interestingly, that's actually quite controversial in the literature now. So
is it?
I think you're referring to this idea of hyperactive agency detection device.
I've never heard of it, but I'm sure that's what I referred to, yes.
So that's the thing of, like, you hear a bump in the night, you immediately assume it's a human. That it's like a burglar or something like that. And therefore, religion. That explanation is very much falling out of favour among people that research the psychology of religion, because that conclusion that you jump to is very much based on your prior assumptions about the environment you're in. So if you're hiking alone in a forest in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, you might be more likely to think bear rather than dangerous human. Also, the assumptions that you make in response to hearing that noise, you can check them really easily. So you hear something go bump in the night and, it's just your cat being a dickhead again. And suddenly that idea of it being a burglar or a ghost is gone. I can't remember. I wish I could remember in better detail the research around this. But yeah, the idea that we are just super prone to assuming that people or supernatural people are responsible for stuff is on pretty shaky ground.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, right. So it cannot be the grounds for more general things like spiritualism either.
Yeah. So I don't think that all of religion and all of spirituality is born out of this supposedly evolved hyperactive agency detection device. Like, the evidence for that is very shaky. Also, not all spiritual beliefs, not all religious paths have a conscious being, like a supernatural version of a human at the center of it. An agency detection device would kind of point towards something with a mind being behind it.
So not like some kind of energy or a field or something that spiritual people often refer to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So can you, we, of course, as skeptics, do not think it's a very good thing to be very spiritual or religious or so, but maybe you, as a researcher, can formulate, is there any particular dangers of being spiritual? Is there any hazards? Some reason that you should avoid it?
Oh, I really don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
So arguably there's a relationship between having spiritual beliefs and stuff like psychosis. But are people who have a vulnerability to these kinds of unhealthy ways of approaching the world, are they more likely to become spiritual? Or can you take a perfectly psychologically healthy person and lead them into psychosis just with spiritual beliefs? I don't know. That would be a very unethical experiment. I would not advise it.
Do not try this at home, people.
Absolutely not. It's difficult. It is difficult. Because I know, like, for me, when I think about it in a very abstract way, something inside me believes that it's not great to have a very loose idea of what it is to evaluate information, of what facts are. Something about that feels like it can't be great. And obviously, we know, especially having lived through COVID lockdowns, that having beliefs that don't change in the face of evidence, that are fundamentally unfalsifiable, can end up in really dark places. Mm-hmm. But in the time that I was living in Glastonbury, getting to know spiritual individuals, spending time in that town, it became increasingly harder to make the argument that, these people are doing something terrible to their brains. Because that just didn't seem to be the case. And there were a lot of people there that were very intelligent, really interesting people, really curious minds. They just happened to have this set of beliefs that I didn't share with them and didn't necessarily agree with. That's it. They weren't, credulous idiots. They're not people that don't think about things. A lot of the spiritual people that I spoke to had clearly thought very deeply about their beliefs. And there were some great community aspects of Glastonbury. I can't say for sure whether it's because of the spiritual nature of the town or because it's such a small town, but the amount of mutual aid that seemed to be going on there was a lot. One of the people that I interviewed as part of my research, one of the things they said is that in Glastonbury, every day of the week, there's somewhere where you can find a free meal. That's invaluable to somebody that's struggling. There's Glastonbury Community Pantry, which is basically a cupboard on the high street where people put food, and if you want it, you take it. You don't have to prove that you're struggling enough to be worthy of this help. And actually, it is open to everyone. So if you happen to be walking past and you've left your money at home and you see a nice looking muffin, help yourself. Just don't be a dick about it. It's got this community spirit. And a lot of the people that are behind that, they see it as part of their spirituality to provide for other people, to be of service for other people. And so when you see that in action, honestly, as a skeptic, it's quite annoying because you're like, damn it. And there's something that people with these beliefs seem to be able to do better than grumpy little bastards like me. And you do suddenly get confronted with, you have this idea of your mind of what is a spiritual person? It's like, it's some middle class idiot that did a gap year and now can't bear to wear shoes because it gives them cramp in their soles, foot or ethereal. Or, and they're just these insufferable bellends. But when you actually spend time with people that are spiritual, that's not the story. That's not who they are.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really took away from my time in Glastonbury is the sense of belonging it gave to so many people. As skeptics, we know what it's like to be in a situation where, one of your colleagues is saying, I feel a cold coming on, so I'm going to drink a lot more orange juice for the vitamin C. And you have that moment where you go, should I explain that actually the research around that is bullshit and eating your own body weight in oranges, well, the cold's going to be the least of your problems, but it definitely won't cure your cold. Or do I just keep my mouth shut? Because I know that if I say that, they're going to roll their eyes. I'm going to be the killjoy. I'm going to be that dickhead that doesn't know when to shut up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think we've all been there or felt the impulse to say what you just said.
Which is why we go to QED.
Yes, of course.
Which is why we go to those meetings. We are suddenly in a space where, oh, thank fuck, I can just say this stuff. And I'm not going to have like the social friction and the pushback. Yeah. And I'm not going to be that dickhead again. Glastonbury provides that for spiritual people.
Yeah. So it's a lot about community.
And venting.
It's about fitting in with the people that are in your immediate social environment. And I can't honestly hold a disliking for Glastonbury or a desire for spiritual people to lose all their beliefs when I know how important it is, how beautiful it is to feel the safety of being around people that have a very similar worldview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what people are getting in Glastonbury. And I would like, I don't want to live there ever again. I felt very strange. I felt very out of place. I felt what it's like to intensely not belong somewhere. But I would hate for that place to change. And I cringe at the idea of skeptics hearing about how odd Glastonbury is, turning up and laughing at people. Because that place provides something invaluable for a lot of people. And who are we to scoff at somebody else's attempt at finding community and belonging?
Yeah. And it's especially that we know exactly what it feels like to be in a community like that. Yeah. You mentioned getting to know these people. So just to get back a little bit to the research side, the way you conduct the research, is it like lengthy interviews with people where they share all their important stories with you? So how can you formulate actual data out of that, which is basically a collection of stories and anecdotes?
So as well as sort of observing stuff and getting involved to some extent with certain things, I was conducting interviews, and we did what's referred to as like semi-structured interviews. So we have a script, we have questions that we want to go over, but if the participant we're talking to takes us off into some interesting direction, we have the flexibility to sort of like follow them down that path. Those interviews were, like, some of them were incredibly interesting. We designed these interviews to last for about 60 minutes each. The shortest one I did lasted about 27 minutes. The longest one was 3.5 hours.
Oh, God.
And that's just the audio recording. That doesn't include the sort of the preamble and then the bit afterwards. I needed to lie down after that one. Like it was super interesting, but that you get a lot of information in 3.5 hours. So what we then do is we turn those recordings into transcripts, and then you can either do something called inductive analysis or deductive analysis. This is if you're doing something that's referred to as a thematic analysis. So thematic analysis broadly is you read over the text and you make a note of like, what are the ideas that are coming up? What's jumping out at me? Well, that's if you're doing inductive, which is where you're reading it and just letting the interview tell you what's interesting. Or there's deductive, where you might go, I'm very interested in how people use specific artifacts in their spiritual practices. And so you would read the interviews probably a little bit faster because you'd be looking for the places where people are talking about things like wands, runes, tarot cards, all that kind of stuff. And then there is a huge amount of personal interpretation. So this is an approach to psychology where so arguably there is no objectivity in psychological research. But certainly when you're doing this, that's referred to as qualitative research. Mm-hmm. And because there's no way to be objective, one of the things that we do is we tell the people reading our papers, this is my positionality, which is about saying, are you part of the community that you're studying, or are you outside of the community that you're studying? What are your beliefs? Are they similar to the people that you're talking to, or are they different? You also have to do something called reflexivity, which is very similar to positionality, but slightly different somehow, where you kind of talk about your experience of the subject that you're discussing, your prior beliefs, what your personal perspective is, what you're bringing into the situation that could change the data. Yeah, so it's much more subjective than asking people to respond to questionnaires.
Yeah.
And it's very different to previous research that I've done, where you do ask a few hundred people some tick box questions and then look at the data and feed it through a machine and go, hey, that's a good p-value. I did a science.
So clearly further research is needed, as people
always
want to say. But so what are the next steps? What is the future for this project? It's not finished, I believe.
No, there's still a few more months to run on it. So for me, I think I've got about 5 more months working on this project. There's 3 PhD students associated with the project, and they had staggered starts. So that'll run for a number of months after I've left. I don't know. I don't know what the future is.
No. But I saw on the website that you were still, of the project was still calling for people to get engaged and to get involved. So if you want to do that, how do you do that and where do you go?
If you Google Spirits and Sources Glastonbury, that will probably get you to our website.
I think it will. I found it, so I will put it on the the show notes if people are interested.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really pitching to the right audience here. Like, I'm assuming most people that listen to this podcast are skeptics. So, I mean, that's one way of getting involved, but obviously only volunteer for studies if you fit the criteria of the participants that we need. Yeah.
Okay, so, but if you're interested in the subject as a skeptic and want to know more, is there any place you want to guide people to go?
Yeah. So if you keep an eye on the Spirits and Sources group via the Brunel University website, as soon as we have publications, we'll hopefully be linking them on there. That's probably the best place for now, that and the website. Hopefully in the next few months, we're going to start to get publications out, and there's going to be some really interesting stuff coming out of that.
All right. Good.
Or email me. I probably won't reply.
Right.
No, I might. I'll try, maybe. I don't know.
Spiritually, we will try to reach you over some sort of ether or something.
I usually answer the week board. It's, yeah.
All right. Before we get very far off track here, I think we should conclude this. And I'd like to thank you, Kat, for coming on the show and talking about your research. And there have been very interesting aspects of this that I'm pretty sure we are not alone in not having ever thought of. So thank you very much for opening our eyes to that. Really refreshing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, thanks for having me on. Like, I could talk about Glastonbury for hours, literally. Yeah, it's a really interesting place. My time there was very strange. It's a huge subject. Like I say, it's a super interesting place. So I would like to say, like, if there are any skeptics listening to this thinking they'd like to visit Glastonbury, please do so respectfully. I mean, even if you're encountering people that to you have beliefs that are really strange, that person is still a person. Don't go to Glastonbury if you want to point and laugh at stuff.
Yeah, going there without respecting those people and their beliefs would be the same as going into that church building and shouting Jesus is fake or something. Yeah, so it's you wouldn't do that.
And that's how I thought about it the whole time I was in Glastonbury, is like, Just because some of these ideas are much more new doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be treated with the same respect. And at the very least, that the individuals that hold them, they deserve respect, like whether you agree with them or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when you feel like you can't bear it any longer and it will come out, just leave.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah, well, I, for one, look forward to an interesting Skepticant talk by Cat Ford in the future. At some point, maybe at the European Skeptics Congress or somewhere else.
There is no way I could keep that talk to 10 minutes. Too much.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been lovely talking to you. I really want to thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kat. It's been great.
And hope to catch you soon.
Yeah.
At one of these events. Liverpool, yeah, definitely. Where we're going to have our community experience. So take care. Good luck with your research. And again, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.
Cheers.
All right. I think that was fun.
Yeah, very fascinating story. And I think we skeptics, I don't think we spend enough time thinking about people who are not skeptics. I mean, we do. Yeah. But we don't think of them in that respect. You want to understand how they work, how they function. And as we heard in the interview, of course, they are not very different from us in some respects. They have just arrived at different conclusions, but they do have the same kind of needs that we have of finding a community and a meaning of life, quote unquote, and we should be careful not to ridicule them for doing so just because they got to another conclusion than we did.
Yeah, we started this episode talking about politics and how political communication can do a lot of damage to a society. And that kind of tribal attitude that fails to remember the very thing that you said, that we have similar needs as humans. And there are more things that we have in common with people thinking differently about that, about religion, about spirituality, than we have differences. So we should really learn those. And the world might just be a better place for that.
Yeah.
Okay, but that brings us to the end of this week's episode. So thank you very much, Pontus.
Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so. And until next week, goodbye.
Hej då.
Vissla. This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social. Like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others.
I don't know how you can believe.
Like a pro. Perfect.
Like a pro. Can I just tell you how brilliant a radio voice you've got?
Thank you. I always feel like I go into twat mode when I do that voice. By the way, like, people that work in this area of research are equally annoyed by the fact that this group has generally started being referred to as noms because it sounds so much like nuns. And these
you have to spell it correctly. Yes.
These are very different people.
Indeed.
Yeah, cool.
Great.
Sounds good. Well, buy me a pint in Liverpool and I will give you the 6-hour version of all of this.
Thank you very much.